stand and join us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, with that, I'll make a motion that we approve the meeting agenda as stated tonight. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mrs. Wood. Any discussion on the agenda? All those in favor? It's unanimous, thank you. All right, since there are no blue cards, we'll dispense with the community open forum and move into special presentations. For those in the audience, you are in for a great night. We now have not one, not two, but three. So we're going to start, I believe, with King and King.
Yes. I'm saving mine for after.
Oh,
Thank you for all the teachers that came. Go ahead, sir.
And I promised that I would preface this presentation with another reminder, both for the audience and for the board. So we will likely have a lot of questions on what's about to be reviewed, most of which we will discuss next meeting in executive session because it's safety and security and it has to do with procedures and what we'll be doing to our buildings to make them more secure. It is not public information, and so I don't want anyone that might be watching this to think that the board is not engaged or wanting to ask questions, but most of them we can't ask in open session. But with that, turn it over to you, Kurt.
great. Good to see everyone. I'm probably going to move around a little bit, so if you can't hear me, let me know. So this capital project that we're going to present tonight is really a culmination of a series of events that started with a conversation and some public forums that we had last year regarding school safety. And from
Why don't we just, and I hate to interrupt you, if you use that mic, then the people can hear you when they're watching. We have like 48 different countries that tune into these, and we don't want to have it without.
well, I can only do German, French, and English.
We
So.
put subtitles. That's three more than that.
All right, is that better? So, yes?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we started with identifying work, physical assessments of the buildings related to those conversations that we had in those public forums. And out of that, what we wanted to do is address in a prioritized fashion those elements that we would recommend to be done at each of the buildings related to work that we've done in other districts across the state and conversations that are ongoing across the nation regarding school safety. So one of those elements in item 2 is to specifically address kind of the entrance and exit strategies in the building, particularly the main entrance where you get the most visitors and access to the building. So step 1 and one critical element of all the buildings is to basically reinforce the main entries and create an entry sequence that's secure, that has a check-in and allows for safe exiting of the building as well. The other thing to point out is that the district has engaged with and continues a partnership with some security experts who have done an overall assessment within the district. That conversation will continue to happen and will be an additive process and a continuance of what we're going to be doing on the physical building side of things, and includes the district policies, procedures, ongoing training, and in particular importance now is the emergency preparedness plans for first responders, the district communications, and so on, which were a big part of those public discussions as well as conversations with these particular security experts. The other part of it, and this is a similar goal that we had with the capital project that we're in right now, is to propose work that has a minimal tax impact overall on the district. So where we are in the schedule of this is that we're proposing right now to vote a capital project for the security infrastructure work as part of the budget, which will be with the budget vote on May 21st. We are, looking at that point to then enter into the design process, which would take us through documents and submission to SED later this year. I know we've had a lot of conversations with the board, particularly with the current project. If we were to do work next summer of 2020, we would absolutely need to enter into the expedited review process. I know that's kind of a touchy subject, but the wait period right now at SED is 8 to 9 months. There was absolutely no way we would get this project out to do any work next summer under the normal process. So I wish I had better news on that front, but that's where we're at with that. So with the expedited review, we bid it in the springtime, and then construction would happen similar to what we're doing now over multiple phases of work in a 2-summer period. One of the key elements of this work, which we'll see in a second, is work associated with kind of reinforcing storefronts, entry systems, glazing, and doors. They have long lead times, so even if in a wonderful world, we wouldn't be able to get the materials on site for the first summer for some of the work anyway. So we absolutely need that 2-summer sequence. And then some of the details associated with that will be worked out as we get into the actual scope of the project. So you're going to see some common themes with each of the buildings. The first is always going to be the office kind of entry sequence in a secure vestibule. So starting with Brewerton Elementary, which happens to be the trickiest of the buildings to accomplish this. For those of you who are familiar with Brewerton Elementary, the main office is set back from where the main entry sequence is. And so to be able to get a secure vestibule, we actually have to put a small addition on that allows that to happen back at where the sidewalk is. And this would be a secure area with multiple locking points and then a check-in point that would then allow or not allow access to the rest of the building. So and we'll see this at all the buildings, but generally this type of sequence allows for people that are just dropping off books or a lunch or other things to happen without actual entry into the school. So it really cuts down a lot of the traffic that potentially, you have people wandering around and not know where they're supposed to be going. The other part of many of the building work is interior door replacements. Some of the doors are not really secure because of the nature of how old they are. We're going to be doing door hardware replacement at Brewerton Elementary, which we're going to be doing at the other buildings. One thing about the hardware replacement on the doors is to allow for secure lockdown inside of the classrooms versus a teacher having to go outside to lock the door. And so that's also part of those elements. Exterior door replacements, and then security and ballistic filming of glazing on many of the glazed surfaces. Hastings Mallory kind of follows Brewerton with the entry sequences, but is one of the easier ones to accommodate because there's already a vestibule at the front of the building. And so what we're going to do is cut in a secure area that comes off of that vestibule and then into the office area. So we don't have to do any extensive work there other than adding a few doors and then cutting a door in for the office area. At this school, we're going to also be doing interior door and hardware replacements, exterior door, the glazing and film, and then we also have window replacement as part of this project as well. A. Cole Elementary. The secure vestibule here, there's an existing outside canopy that's pretty significant. We can utilize that, restructure it, and then create a separate exit-only vestibule and then an entry-only secure vestibule into the office area. So in many cases, most of this work is not too difficult to accomplish with some reconfiguration of the offices and adding some doors.
Kurt, excuse me, when you speak of window replacement, are you speaking of window replacement just in the vestibule areas?
No, when we talk specifically about window replacement, it's of windows in the school.
So on like the ground floor and everything?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Millard Hawk Elementary, we also have a canopy, but that canopy is associated only with an existing pair of doors. So we create an exit vestibule there and then a side entry that would bring you right into the office off to the side of that. And again, we've got interior door and hardware replacements, exterior door, and ballistic glazing film. And then at Millard Hawk, we're doing some of the windows as part of the current capital project, and this will continue and finish the window replacement at that building.
If you don't mind, I'll ask you
Please do.
a question. So if you can go back to the previous slide, with the ballistic glazing film, if we are doing new windows, is there not a cheaper, more efficient way? Like they don't come with it already on it? Is there any cost savings to doing that? Or
No, so the nice thing about the window replacement is that the filming can be done in the factory. And yes, it's not only a savings, but it's a better installation.
okay.
Yeah, so with the new windows, that's ideal because that can be done in a controlled situation with the windows as they're being glazed versus after the fact.
Thanks.
CSI, we tried to minimize the work here, given the unknown nature of kind of future of what we're going to be doing with CSI, but still to accomplish it, there's a little vestibule, again, similar to the previous example, that we're going to create off to the side of the main entry area, and then actually create an exit vestibule, because right now there's just those doors and that single window wall. And there's a lot of glazing along that front, so that would all be filmed as well. The middle school has kind of an interesting situation with that kind of deep entry-exit vestibule that exists. And one of the difficulties with the middle school is that the office area as it currently exists is kind of remote from the main entrance. And so what we would need to do there is actually an adjacent room that has some flexibility off to the side, create in one of those bays an exit vestibule that still maintains the exits out of the existing building, so that entry into the building would be into this space and then secure all the way back into the building. So, and then in each of these cases, there's even the opportunity to install or program in a transaction window, so that, again, you don't need to actually have people entering into the office area if they just need to drop something off or, provide a permission slip or something for a student.
I'm assuming that all this would be, like those front exit doors would be opened up for the students to come and go during the rush in the morning versus trying to filter through the vestibules?
Oh, yeah, of course. So the policy side of this gets into the monitoring of when the students are arriving and exiting the building. So what most normally happens, the secure vestibules are an access point for visitors only. It's not access and entry or exit for students. So the students would continue to come in and out of the main doors monitored by teachers during those kind of peak times.
Enough said, thank you.
Yeah. And then with the high school, what we have here is another example of something that just requires kind of a reconfiguration of what you have right now. And you can actually look at this when you leave tonight. But there's an old brick, not old, the original brick building wall on both sides. Right now the doors are back in kind of this plane. So what we would do is pull out the entry doors for the secure vestibule, recess by doing that the exit doors so they're kind of remote and off kind of the visual path, and you still maintain all what you have right now, which is kind of a reconfiguration of that. So you enter into the secure vestibule, and then you can enter into the office area, which would have to be reconfigured to allow that to happen.
For just a question, for that, I'm assuming that's the entrance that most of us walked in tonight.
Correct.
So that would no longer be a student entrance?
No, it would, because you could still, during peak times, you could still maintain these same sets of doors in and out of the building. And then at some point when that is over, you would then go back to just an exit only and a visitor entry. Yep. And a lot of these changes at other schools that we've done this work with are related to teaching the parents as part of kind of orientation of kind of how we operate. If you need to get something to your student, this is what you're going to do. And so some of it is training and policies and some other things. But for the most part, what we find is the actual reconfiguration is happening is not too dramatically different than what the students are used to anyways, because for them, it's not going to be any different than what they have experienced so far for the most part.
Kurt, what's the criteria? I was surprised to see no windows. I guess I'm focused on windows tonight, so I'm sorry about that. At the high school, like especially down the math, the lower levels,
You mean window replacement?
window replacement.
Yeah, so again, it's part of that prioritized list of the windows that are in the current proposed capital project that we pushed into the security project were prioritized based on the condition and age of the windows.
So are there windows in the current project in the high school?
Not new windows, we're getting glazing film on the windows.
In the high school?
Yes,
Hence, we're not getting them here, is what you're
correct.
saying.
Yep.
Got it.
Yep.
But just so Tim, so you know, so.
And it's kind of a twofer for elementary, because the windows are so old. So it's a twofer, it's replacing them, but it's also putting the glaze for the windows here at the high school that were fine. We don't need to replace them, we just need to glaze them.
Correct.
One quick question,
Yeah.
just my brain. The doors to your secure area there.
Uh-huh.
I noticed one is the way I would expect it to be, which is if the door is, you can't push easily against it, right? You have to pull, which is harder to do. Whereas the second one, where you first enter into that area, is a push. Is there a reason for that? Is that law, or is that?
Well, we have to maintain safe exiting out of the building, and so we can't change that. So in case of the main exit doors of the building as they exist now, we can't reconfigure those. So those always have to open out in the direction of travel. This-
Yeah, that
Yeah. So this entry is locked typically and can only be opened when you're buzzed in. And so it really doesn't matter which direction it flows, because the other point is that this door is also locked. So even if somebody were able to get into this door, they still wouldn't be able to get into the school because these other doors are locked. And
Right, because that one up there is harder to push through per se.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah, but they'll all be locked, and you'll have to be given access to enter into the school building. So the proposed project summary for each of these buildings has been looked at by the architectural team as well as the construction manager. And so these have been looked at based on the scope of work, the volume of glazing and windows, as well as what we need to do to accomplish all of the scope. So it's broken down based on those estimates by building. These are project costs, so these are total costs, which add up to just shy of about $12 million for all of that work. If we were to say to you today, under the best of circumstances, we would recommend that you do all this work based on all the conversations that we have. But we still have choices. So the next part of that is Maureen and King, as well as your fiscal advisors, took that information and ran some projected costs of tax impact for this project based on those numbers that I just showed. And there's two scenarios, which I'm going to do my best to explain without getting too complicated. But the worst case scenario with a $11,790,000 project is that the tax impact would be 21 cents per thousand, or $21 on 100,000 assessed property. So that's if everything kind of stays the way it is right now. There's another scenario that unfortunately has to do with some negotiations with SED. This is where it gets a little complicated. Because we have a capital project that's going on right now, there's a series of costs that have been attributed to almost all the buildings in the district for those capital projects. SED allows kind of a maximum threshold that they'll aid at any one given period of time at a building. You can do many projects at a building, but if it exceeds that maximum cost allowance, then the district starts to pay for it potentially without the aid implications. Okay? We have a situation at only one building, and it's Millard Hawk, and it's because Millard Hawk is getting the most extensive of work in the current capital project. And so there's we've actually are very close to the maximum cost allowance for just that building. However, the costs of the project to date have been much less than what we anticipated when we submitted it to SED a year and a half ago. So that's all very good. The problem is there's not an elegant way to deal with SED for things that come in a lot less than what you anticipated when you were proposing what the costs were at the submission process. So we have, in the past, in these kind of odd situations, we've gone back to SAD and submitted revised forms. And in theory, if they allow us to do that again, which we will sort out in the next month, then the tax impact would be 11 cents per thousand, and that would be $11 a year. So it's not easy for me to explain it much better than that, and we can get into a lot more depth possibly in the future of that, but you know, it's just the way that the system works in terms of how much they'll aid at times when multiple projects are going on.
So what would your thoughts be? We have a legislative forum up at the city Posties campus on Saturday. Is there anything we can try to lobby our elected officials to assist with that scenario you were talking about? Reality is all of our elected officials are saying safety and security is their number one priority, and yet we have these rules that are possibly putting limitations on what we can do.
Yeah, I wish there was a magic way that we could deal with this, and sometimes elected officials can make some headway with some of these things. These are rules that have been in place for a very long time. So Maureen and I and Tom wanted to make sure we were just very transparent about where we are right now. I feel very positive that we, you know, with further discussions with SED, we'll get to the right spot. But before we go out to the voters of the district, we want to make sure that that's a guarantee. So I'll hesitate to say there's not much others can do, but I think if we kind of stick to it, we'll get where we want to be. So what's next? We have time. Really, this is the kind of first presentation to say here we are with the scope. We expect that there will be questions, and so we have the month of February to engage with the board on what those might be. Any comments, any other concerns that we might want to incorporate, we can get that done. With the main goal of kind of the end date where action must be taken is March 25th. At that board meeting, we will have to, at the very latest, do a secret resolution and set the referendum for the cost and the date. That gives us that 45-day time frame to the May 21st vote date. Public forums will be determined, and as I mentioned before, the vote date on the 21st. So that's where we're at.
So realizing that you probably don't have this number off the top of your head, and by the way, I'll start with, are we set, is King set to be at our next meeting? Or that if possible, executive session?
So that's what we were gonna talk now about. Did we say which February meeting worked for them?
The second one.
The second meeting. Okay. So the second meeting in February, we will have executive session where we can talk about the safety and security things.
Okay, in that case, I won't even bore you with the other question. I'll email it through Tom, just breaking down some of what we just covered, and that way we can, have a discussion.
Yeah, if we can be better prepared for that meeting, if you can send us that stuff ahead of time, that'd be great.
Great
Yeah.
job. Oh, sorry.
Well, I just have 2 points. One is for the board. I mean, I talked about it before, but I'd like to have a long-term look at CSI. What's the long-term goal for that building? So if we're going to be putting a bunch of money presented to the board, so we have a clear understanding of what the 5-year, 10-year, 15 plan is for that building before we start sticking a bunch of money into it. It's planned out, and we're doing it. It's fantastic. And second, for King, when we're talking about what I'd like to know is we're going to do A, and that's going to affect the risk and have it defined by risk as far as what we're doing this because we're going to mitigate this type of risk as far as it goes, because the security is great. You can't do everything at once. So if the risk is to restrict public inside the building, right? Because we want to reduce that, then that would be one risk. If we're going to, another risk would be, we want to ensure that nobody enters the building with a weapon. You know, that would require screening, magnetometer, X-ray equipment. So, what are you trying to mitigate with the work that's being done? It should equate as far as this is what we're going to do. This is the risk that we intend on reducing, and this is the reason why we're doing it.
Correct. Yep. And that goes back to the dovetail element of this is the security expert assessment and how, you know, there's going to be different prioritized levels. I mean, we deal with the built environment piece of it, but it absolutely fits in and has to be coordinated with the other elements to make sure that we've mitigated the risk that we think we can most effectively mitigate at this point in time.
Yeah. Which, like when we had the building condition survey from not that many years ago, it was 135 million, we had to come down to 41 million. But to the first point, so I want to go on record again to say, so CSI, our plan with that, and Michelle Lanya, our new head of special ed, is going to play a key role because she came from BOCES where they built the program, is to be able to, looking at the cost of some of these programs over there, for us to be able to have our own, hiring our own teachers to be able to do that. I've always said before, if the threshold, if the delta between our teachers and us paying, you know, retirement and benefits and retirement, now all of a sudden we'll say it's more feasible, because at the end of the day, the old mindset was, well, we're not paying, well, we still are paying 20% of the Arwada of the retirement of city BOCES workers too. So, but that's just one part, is the financial part, but the other part is that these students will feel more part of our community if they're in our district, as opposed to getting some of these special ed services that are very costly out of the district. But the plan is to look at special ed programming. But that's something that I've tasked Michelle, is for her to put something together. Now, I don't think you've even been here 30 days yet so far, but her plan is to really build that out, to get a cost breakdown of all those programs for city BOCES, but then also what those programs would look like. But to your point, what's it going to look like 3 years, 5 years, 10 years out?
Well, yeah, because infrastructure rise, right? Because when you looked at BOCES, you could lease the space, but then you found that the power wasn't going to be there to supply it, so you'd have to redo the power. You know, are you going to have air conditioning in the building, split units? I mean, what kind of programs do you have, and then what's the infrastructure that's going to be required of the building, and do we have the money to support the programs? And it should all make sense.
Well, we're never going to replicate what BOCES were like with the welding, or specific high needs where it has to be air conditioned everyone. But there's a lot of programs we're sending our kids to paying it that don't have those conditions over there. So if we can replicate that, but I have a lot of confidence in her experience from actually working over city BOCES on what we can replicate here, not only for a cost savings, but also giving those students in Central Square that sense of community. And I go on record again to say, I've got an autistic child, and I would like to, the best scenario is that they can replicate that program within the district, as opposed to putting them in a different program out of the district where they don't really feel like they're part of the district. So if we can do that here, that's a home run on both sides.
Okay, look forward to it.
Yeah, so the last part of this, I just want to segue over to Amanda, who's just going to give you a quick update on the current capital project that's getting close to bidding.
Thank you. Good evening. We're talking about the next project, but I wanted to update you on the current project, which is phase 2 of the project. We have full SED approval as of a couple of weeks ago, which is a great thing. We are finishing up documents, and they will be on the street later this week, early next week for bidding. So that'll be about a month, and then we will be opening bids at the end of next month. So that is the update there. There was a sheet in your packet just to give you a quick update on how things have changed. I will note there is one thing that has been added to the phase 2 capital project, and that is.
Well, I'm sorry, Maureen, does everybody have?
I don't think so, because it wasn't online.
Can we bring it up so you can see it, and we'll get you a copy of it?
It's the same one you had like about a month ago, with a couple of lines added to it.
So this is just an update that we wanted to provide you. As Maureen mentioned, a lot of this you've seen previously, but there was a couple of things that we wanted to note that were added. And the first thing is at Millard Hawk, we added some exterior wall panels to the project. About a month ago, we were notified from Paul and his staff, Mr. Bursett and his staff, that they were doing some routine maintenance in the lower level of Hawk, and they had pulled some casework away from the wall, and there was actually water coming into the wall cavity. So we got together with the administrative team and had that discussion, and we are replacing the windows as part of the capital project. And if we go ahead and replace those windows and leave the wall panels where we are pretty sure that water is getting in, it will not help the infrastructure of the building. So our suggestion was that along with replacing the windows, that we also replace the exterior walls, stucco panels in portions of that building. So that's the addition that you see. And Kirk mentioned that the windows have been moved at Hastings Mallory and at Cole to the security project. That was for a couple of reasons. The first being we had to add the wall panels to Hawk, which we thought was really necessary because it didn't make sense to replace the windows and not those wall panels. And two, we are finding with the current bidding conditions and the number of projects that are currently on the street, we're trying to make this project as simple and easy as possible, and some of those windows were alternates, and we've been getting a lot of feedback from contractors that projects with a lot of alternates are not as favorable as ones that are more simple. The thought being is if it gets too complicated, they're simply, and we've had this experience with other clients, they're simply putting them down and going on to the next project, which is not what we want. We want as many bidders as absolutely possible to bid our projects. So we, with the opportunity with the security project, we, along with Turner, have made the recommendation to reduce the number of alternates we have in this project. If the bids do in fact come back favorably and there's additional money, then we'll go back out for essentially a phase 3 for those windows, which would give us more room in the security project to do other things. Does anybody have any questions about that?
Can you clarify, what's the deduct on the gym floor and the remaining gym work?
So we have added deduct alternates essentially to protect the budget. So if for some reason the bids don't come back favorably, that essentially allows you to look at those as deducting them from the contract, and we don't have to go back out on the street again to rebid. It's essentially.
So for the public to be clear, they're still doing the work?
Correct.
Okay.
So if for some reason the bids come back higher than we expect,
Yep.
it still gives you opportunity to accept those
Thank you.
bidders, of course.
Because we can't exceed that 41 million.
We're just trying to protect the budget.
Thank you.
Are there any questions or concerns?
Age?
No, thanks for the update.
Sure, and if you do have any questions, of course let us know.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. All right, so as we mentioned, so we'll have King back